The term for submissiveness carries the idea of getting in line, of very underneath, to go under. So imagine like if you're in a military arrangement, to get into line with the order and instruction, is what it means to submit. That's the picture. That's the meaning behind the word itself.
Okay, so to get in line. Once again,
Read that verse again.
let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness.
I'd say let a man learn quietly as well, with all submissiveness.
Yes, I was going to refer you back when we got through this, Daddy. We're going to read all of chapter 2.
Right. It's not, so Paul says, as his requirement, right? It's not a commandment from God. You understand what I'm saying?
I think you did. Help me out with that.
Commandment is a different thing. That's the point I'm making. Okay. Read the previous verse. Don't have it.
I'll read it. It says, but with what is proper for a woman who professes godliness with good works.
You gotta understand too that, the time that Paul's preaching, a woman's position, I mean, the woman was up there trying to teach. At that time in that society, it would have been scandalous.
Culturally
Also unacceptable.
So a question I asked last week, and we kind of circled it, we never really got to it. Is this Paul's direction from God that this is handled in church? That women, this is the way women are to act in church, in an assembled church? And then we have to ask ourselves, well, what was an assembled church at that time? So what's he saying right there? Is this direction for their everyday, moment by moment, waking life? Or is this for an
This is a
assembled
public
church?
assembly, public forum is a cultural thing, I think.
And church
I
as,
think he was talking about in church.
Yeah.
This is how it was.
so we're all on the same sheet of music here. Okay, so and if that's the case, what was an assembly like at that time frame?
I want to help us out here. These go directly into qualifications for overseers in chapter 3. This is particular to the assembly. Now, in the ancient world, it was actually normal to have women yelling and teaching, because the priestesses and the cultists, so that was actually normal. So for him to tell them to, when in fact in the assembly of believers, women are not to have teaching when they're in a position of authority, teaching when they're in positions of authority. Because we know elsewhere in the New Testament, he expects women to be mentoring, teaching women, teaching children. There are cases of Priscilla and Aquila where they go and they explain doctrine to someone who's confused. So, but these are particular, because it goes into qualifications later. He does not permit a woman to teach when exercising authority as an elder or something like that in the church. This seems to be the direction he's going because of the context. And I think that can help with interpretation, because he does not seem to be giving instruction on positions in government or elsewhere. He's particularly talking about the people of God because of where he goes in chapter 3 with this. But just trying to help people with the framework.
Yeah. So is everybody okay with that? Are we kind of thinking through this in the same way? All right, I agree. I had notes on that, John. I thank you for.
Now, let me follow up, because I was doing a word thing. I know what the thought was, but I didn't have it right from me.
Okay.
He says, I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. He's not saying that you can't. He's saying that he doesn't. It's not a commandment. It's not directed that way.
Okay.
But to John's point was it's in that role, it's not that they're not to teach or not to have the ability to teach or mentor scripturally. It's that I think I think that word goes back to, not only exhibit, or it's assert, isn't it, like, to,
So you're saying it was a command from Paul, not God? I don't understand what Richard was saying.
A commandment comes from God, exactly.
Well, Paul does delineate when he's giving an opinion. He's quite vocal about it. Just like marriage, not marriage, he says that's my personal preference. And so if he does that in other texts, if he does not mean for us to take it as teaching from God, I would assume he would tell us. So
That's not what I'm saying, guys. I'm saying exactly what you just said. He says, for me, it's better not to be married. But rather than burn in lust, you should get married, right? He's saying, as a leader in his church, he does not allow women to have authority over men, right?
exercise.
Exercise authority. That's what he's saying. That the leaders should be men. That's what he's saying.
right, and he expects us to follow the example and do it because of the application. That's yeah. I was just trying to help make clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I see your point. Leading to the,
Yeah, I'm still confused.
to the chapter.
I'm still confused. So is it the law of the church, or is it, it's Paul's law? So that's the question, right?
Any ideas?
I mean, through the entire Bible, it's been a man that's interpreted God's word, right? That's his word. So if Paul's interpreting that, what's the difference of God making the law or Paul making the law?
I think what he's saying is.
There's a very simple answer to that. That's a facetious
It's
question.
teaching, it's in the teaching part of the church. I think it's right, it's being in a church setting, when it's teaching, it's not meaning that women are not gonna teach, because of course women teach other women teach children.
Yeah, I think it's limited to exercising authority.
I think it's an exercise, it's like an elder or something, I think it's being
Okay, I get
being
it.
an elder, or being a,
Right,
someone.
like John's point is, it leads up to chapter 3 about overseers in the leadership positions, that, men are perfectly lazy enough to let women do everything. And I think, he's using an example of Adam was formed first, Eve second, Eve was deceived, he's leading to this, he says men should take their leadership roles, and women should have authority over the leadership roles in the church. Trying to, I think.
Usurp authority.
Yeah, and I think that's the most, yes, absolutely. And I think that's the direction he seems to be going because it's consistent with the rest of the teaching. That, the case is, there are women being called to teach.
Sure.
And they should be, but they shouldn't be teaching while being an elder or holding a position of authority. It's different if, let's say the elders get together, or I specifically ask my wife to speak up or teach on something that she has, right? She's not teaching in a position of eldership at the church. She's being commissioned to do that kind of thing. So
So you're saying if you're not an elder, you can teach a man? You're saying if you're not an elder, a woman can teach a man?
If the elders, see, this is what Paul, Priscilla and Aquila, case in point, the husband expects his wife to help him correct the doctrine of someone who's not strict. So there is a case if the elders are calling someone, but it's the teaching while holding a position of that kind of authority, which he seems to be banning.
Well, why? If men can do it, why can't women?
That's
Are we incapable of multitasking then?
Oh, come on.
It's hard for us.
But why? A man can be an elder and he can teach, but a woman can't be an elder and she can't teach?
Well, I mean, we're, if you really look at one of both, this is where this discussion can get kind of crazy, but
I know it's a time and culture, I think, but.
it's not even the time and culture. In our time and our
The
culture right now,
thinking
the
behind.
has bastardized what the Lord wants for our society right now. So to me, I look at the society that we have right now, and using that as a context to apply to God is just not correct. I mean, my personal
So
opinion.
this is.
We're in a very evil world right now that's doing things right now that's not necessarily biblical.
This is where the rubber hits the road,
It's hard.
okay? This is hard to get through. So I was speaking with Phil and Linus this week about this. And I think what Linus suggested, I thought a lot about this and Greg does too, is everyone needs to take a step back and look at the overarching premise that Paul is trying to make here. And that's why I wanted to read the entire chapter at the end. Because the essence of what we're looking for here is a life of godliness. Man and women. So it's tough in the world that we live in today because of the delineations that were made here, that some people take offense. And I mean, that happens. But I also think that if you step back from it and say, the life that a man should lead and the life that a woman should lead, the essence of their life should be one of godliness for both of us. Yes, Lana.
I want to piggyback on what you just said about the taking offense part, right? Because in a passage like this is one of these passages that reveals not only our current cultural, the complexities and the conflicts, but a passage like this, as it progresses, it actually exposes areas of doctrine that we're very weak in the sense that verse 13, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. Basically, our doctrine of Genesis is off, which is the reason why it's hard for us to accept something like this. If you go back to the ways of Genesis, and you go back to even how things were working before, ideally it was man first, guiding the way, woman comparable helper, which means that he is the puzzle piece to man's fulfillment, right? So that's what happens there. At the fall, the verse says this about woman, for example. Your desire shall be contrary to, or literally it's the idea of toward. The idea is that you're going against. The idea is that your desire is toward your husband, but he shall rule over you. Now that's an interesting word because everywhere before this, it's always been dominion and stewardship.
Right.
Now you have this idea of authoritative dictatorship. So what happens is at the fall, what woman has done is that her conflict is going now against the husband, which is an authority, and the husband responds with unloving tyranny against his wife. And that becomes the new dynamic of how we now function with one another. So the question of, for example, the question of our day, well, why not? That is actually an echo of Genesis 3. And the man's response is, well, why shouldn't it? It's also an echo of Genesis 3. So what happens then in a verse like this is that we're, in all the New Testament really, is a reversal of Genesis 3, and the church has to lead the way in order to show it, right? So go back to then 2 Timothy, or 1 Timothy. He says, I don't permit a woman to teach. I think the context of being an authority and all this kind of ideas is very applicable. But let's say it's not in the sense of church eldership only, but we do know it's supposed to take place in a church, right? And look at the qualities. Do not exercise over a man, rather she is to remain quiet. And we'll look at the idea of quiet in a second. And I think Phil and both Greg have something about the words there. But for Adam was formed first, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived because of a transgression. Yet she will be saved through childbearing. So the idea is let women learn quietly with all submissiveness. The idea of submissiveness, why? Because in Genesis 3, the inclination is to take over, right? So rather than going off to other weeds of the conversation, the idea is we need to temper what it means to take over, right? And that's really the temperament. Because if you look at verses 8 through 11, there are hands that are raised, but should be without anger or quarreling. There's a quality of hand raising. There's a quality of adorning. And what is that? Being respectable, modest, and self-control. That means the inability to be submissive is literally the inability of being modest and being controlled, right? And so we kind of have to look at those as kind of balancing together. So the questions of what about this position? What about that position? That's actually a later conversation. Until we can get to the conversation of are you willing to be submissive? Which actually, if you think about it, I was talking about it with our family at home. The one who takes offense is because of one's pride, right? The one who does not take offense is because the one has been humbled. So if one is humbled and submissive, honestly speaking, you don't ever have to have the feeling of having to take the reins of anything, whether you're male or female, right?
This doesn't have to interfere with the dynamic of the husband and wife relationship. Those are all internal, different aspects of it, Ideally, like you're talking about in Genesis 3, that companionship to support, to be the puzzle piece to the husband. Ideally, as a two-way street, and, it's gonna work out that way. It doesn't always work out that way, no. So, this teaching here doesn't contradict that in any way, you know what I'm saying?
Those of us who are married look at this through a lens of the marriage relationship too. So, when a young lady who's not married, this is a very complicated world for you guys.
You have no idea.
I see.
You have no idea.
I know that you got to swipe left or right to figure it out. Right?
I'm just saying that you have no idea. Like your generation has no idea what dating is in this life.
So here's the thing. Well, I do. I have a 24-year-old daughter. I do know. As a matter of fact, I do. Now, I'm not being mean about it, but I certainly.
I'm saying you can understand, but unless you're in it doing it, you don't really get it.
So here's the thing. If you go and read 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and you can grasp this one concept, you can deal with dating in 2019. Do not be unequally yoked. Right? And the only purpose for dating someone is to find someone to marry. So if you're dating people just for fun or hanging out just for fun, you're going to be in trouble. That's the fact. Do I understand it or not?
You don't understand the concept, but you don't understand dating.
I understand that, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad I
Thanks, Lois.
Yeah, you
No,
know.
but Richard's point is if you hold to that concept.
Correct.
then-
But it
then
doesn't
you'll-
change the world we're living in,
Right.
and the people that we
It's
have
pretty easy
to.
when you get that, but the world doesn't get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the conversation about dating now,
Everybody.
I think conversation about dating now is actually way off to being that in different things.
Sorry, man.
Because the conversation here in this text is the idea of quietness with all submissiveness. And so we have to stick with that passage because it's not really talking about dating or anything like that. Again, if it's a conversation about that, going back to Genesis 3, just that conversation alone reveals the fact that we're not really understanding the concept of what it means to.
So if we back up to Genesis 3, we got to go also to this idea about Eve took the fruit and gave it to who? And who was where?
He was by her side.
Right there with her. Okay? So when we talk about submissiveness and humbleness and those, that applies to men as well as women.
Right, yeah, so I was thinking that too. It's two-
When we talk about sinful nature and doing things wrong, men have a tendency to lord that over women. Right. Ashley.
Which
Ashley?
I'll just speak from,
Yeah.
yeah, so looking at the passage, I do feel like it's the whole idea is of submissiveness, right? Because
Symmetry?
when we're submissiveness, when we're
Submissive.
looking at even the first part of the rulers, I think Paul's trying to show again, like submissiveness is always godly, not but he's trying to show the godly way of submitting, regardless of when you have people in authority over you who are not godly. It seems like submissiveness is no longer a good thing. And so I think part of him reiterating, like, well, here's the ideal, here's what it should look like. All of you all should be submitting to those who are God's appointed as leaders in authority. That's difficult, right? Especially looking at their time and how leaders were. It's difficult now looking at how leaders are. And then the men, like, who do they mainly quarrel with? I mean, even in marriage, right? Typically it's your spouse. That will be your first point of quarreling, I think, is probably with your spouse. But instead he's saying, no, like if you're submitting to God, then instead of quarreling with your spouse, your submission to God is going to change that relationship and your dynamic outside of your home, but even with your spouse as well. And then women, right? Obviously we don't like being lorded over at times, right? And so he's saying, here it is, you could go and you can adorn yourself with all these things, and you could go out and say, well, I don't have to submit anymore. And that is not going to lead you actually where you want to be, because God's reminding that you would submit to a godly, leader.
I think those are valid points, yeah.
So, anyway, I do think that the main point of this is the submission, that even though it's difficult at times to submit, that is really what God's desire is for all of us, male and female.
Actually, yes, and it's really kind of a picture too of us with Christ. All of us in general, we submit. We need to be submissive to our God.
I'll say this, that the man, the husband is submissive to God and the will of God, it's easy for the woman to submit.
Yeah, it's not like it doesn't feel like lording over it all, or everything in its place. I mean, it's the same thing if you had someone leading you in battle, you want there to be a clear leader, you want someone to like take on that role and that responsibility, and you want to follow the leader. And so I think that's just how God designed it.
I think the way God set up the human race was there has to be someone who is designated as a leader. Doesn't mean that they're going to be a good leader. We can see several instances where men or not have failed in that task miserably. But the natural order would suggest that if that's the way it was established. Moving on. You have a comment?
Look at that, a part in First Corinthians chapter 11.
Which I have, yes.
First Corinthians chapter 11, from verse 9 down, David.
I had made a reference to on 1 Corinthians 14, 34 and 35. 1 Corinthians 11, 5 is probably what you're referring to.
Start from like verse 9 or a little bit above it and go down to verse 4.
Would you like to read it?
Says here in verse, let's say start from verse 7. For man ought not to cover his head, that's a different subject, but then from verse 8. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman is made from man, so man is not more woman. And all things are of God. That's it.
That's kind of the balance that we were talking about earlier. I think you and I had talked about that too, how that balance is struck in life. The women are the ones who give birth and in childbirth. And that kind of helps set the balance. Yes, Lance?
And so going back to verse 11, let a man, verse Timothy, let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. So you did a word study on quietness and quiet, and what did you find from that? That's like what we're talking about.
Helpful. You think of quiet as we usually think of no talking, right? No talking. That's what it means. So the commentary I was reading said it does not mean complete silence or no talking, but to settle down, undisturbed, and not unruly. So that kind of falls in line with submissiveness. It's the same word that we when you look at 1 Timothy verse 2. Is it 2? Yeah, it is. Okay. We are to pray for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life. The same word quiet, the same word. It's not actually the same. It's the male version, but here it's the female. Same idea. Quiet word really well ordered. So I think that was helpful for me when I was reading it. All right, so I'm not saying no talking, but it kind of balances. Because when you go to other places where it's used, and Acts 22, 2 Thessalonians, the idea of orderly, not speaking out of turn, not chaotic. The assembly is to be a place where there is not kind of worried. So that's kind of, I think, where he's starting with this as well.
So I think that's why, I think that's really important, and the reason why I want to bring it up, because the picture of our culture, that we read something and take offense to the words, right? And you take offense to the word, really that exposes the heart of God to take offense to the word. No one questioned the word quiet, because we assumed that it meant silence, like a monastic kind of response, like you can't speak. Therefore, your idea of submission is in line with shush, but it's not. Submissiveness is the one that describes or fleshes out what it means to be quiet. And quiet is to not be unruly, right? To not be overbearing, to not always, to go against, to push back, or to draw the line and have to come to your side. That's the idea behind it. So that means what you do, instead of drawing the line, instead of pushing back, what you, with all submissiveness, you stop, right? And so going back to this whole picture, that the context seems to be that the woman learned with this way, because why? Back to Genesis 3, the natural inclination of women is to push, right? And yes, we can talk about men all we want, but they're going to get theirs in chapter 3. Right? So to derail now to men is derailing away from women, but we can't do that. Right now, as women, stop pushing back. This is the big picture. That's why in verse 15, continue with faith and love and holiness and self-control, which bookends verse 9, respectable, modesty, self-control. So, as much as it's heavy now, it's going to get to the men in leadership and the expectation of the church. So the idea is that to learn, to receive teaching without pushing back, and as far as it takes, put all inclinations of Genesis 3 away. And this is what is being called of. And if you, and if you look just in your own family, and I'm not telling you about the relationship with the husband and wife, because the relationship of husband and wife is a mirror of the marriage that happens within Christ and the church. And if you notice anything in our own families, as men, we are very naturally tyrannical, whether by silence or by verbal abuse. And women are very naturally always pushing against. It's just the way that dynamic works. So if that's the case within a home, that's the case within the church, that's the case in the workplace, that's the case out in society. And based on chapter 2, we're also supposed to be, kind of like the pillars of this example from the home into the church and then everywhere. Because chapter 2 talks about the idea of doing all this in front of all people, right? So it's not just a church-only context. It begins in a church-only context because that's where the truth has to be lived out first.
Right.
So
it has to start here.
Yeah. If you can't do it here, there's no way it's happening in your house, right?
And if I'm understanding you correctly, it's not just in a husband and wife relationship. Is that correct or wrong?
No, correct. It's just that it's going to bleed over to these areas, but it has to happen in this context first.
Yes.
If it can't happen in this context, it won't lead to the family, it won't lead to your workplaces. If men can't be loving, and women can't be, quiet in this way, leading a quiet life, then it'll be very hard pressed to be convinced that happens in the house.
It's like Greg was saying in the beginning too, there's a lot to unpack here. If you're, so would you direct your wife or your daughter or another woman to go into the world and be submissive to a man who's not godly?
I don't know, it's like not being equally yoked, like you said.
Right.
Like,
So
but then there's other parts of scripture though, that
Yeah.
say, hey, by your way of life, you will.
yeah. So there's a whole lot of things. There's
a lot of circumstances that there's variables in those things.
Yeah, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, all of those things enter into it, and then you have to go in this world and deal with the last minute breakthrough. This idea that we would be submissive to one another and loving and kind and humble and all of these things in here, this is where it has to start. But there are situations out there where you cannot submit to the person who's trying to push you around and tell you something different, right?
There are, but I also think that there are situations. Let's look at it from the lady's perspective.
I don't understand what he's
If you were in a position of that where, let's say at your work, you're fine, you're doing wonderful, you have a great boss and everything else, and that happens to be a man. He gets promoted, and all of a sudden you're placed in a position where the person who comes in is not. From a lady's perspective, you have a terrible boss. From a lady's perspective, what an opportunity for them to show those gifts of, gifts of a Christian modesty and how they act, the godliness in their lives, and everything. That gives her an opportunity to witness and to also to be recognized for that and maybe help other people see that, and maybe he turns into a good one.
Well, I think about the
Through our
speak the
actions.
truth and love first, like I always come back to it as like your marriage relationship, your relationship, you're in. Like, it doesn't mean, and again, the politeness doesn't go back to keep your mouth shut. Well, just go about your business and let them, be tranquil or whatever. Like, it's speak the truth and love. How can you go to someone and correctively say, hey, whether it's male or female, this isn't right, right? If you're a woman in the workplace and you're being passed up and all men are getting promoted, right? I think speaking the truth and love is saying, hey, you know what, this wasn't fair, this isn't according to the practice of the company or the.
Hey, man, you made my point way better than I did.
I mean, well, I don't know,
Do you think it always goes back to where you are with the Lord, where your heart is with the Lord?
But then we don't have a right to then go and like act any kind of way you want toward that cause, right? That's where we're
Remember,
restrained, like.
this kingdom is Satan's kingdom. My personal feeling, I think a lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 50 years, 60 years, is just getting us away from this truth. So we sit there and go, oh, that's in church, oh, it's not the word, oh, it's not this. I think you've got to make some kind of decision.
It's not the word is working in your heart, is what I was trying to say, is if you're getting up every day and asking the Lord for guidance, all of this stuff isn't all that hard. It's when we get in play and we decide how things should be done.
Right.
And when we get our feelings hurt and when we want to start an argument with somebody,
Right.
you need to, as you're following the Lord, I mean, in my own life, I know if I present my day like that with my boss or my husband or my children, I'm the ruler of my heart, not the Lord. So it just, to me, all this conversation goes back to individually, where am I with the Lord? Is the Holy Spirit on the throne of my life, or am I on the throne of my life? And then it isn't hard, I mean, it's hard, we struggle with it. It's hard, but it is what we're supposed to be, where our heart should be every day of our life. I think what happened as a young woman, because I've had some experiences, and when I was in charge, and I was upset, it never was preached from this. It was preached from my own. And I think that's what we have to get down to in these scriptures for women. If we take offense to this, we need to get on our knees, because there's something not right that we take offense to this. That's how I have learned from the women that have come before me. And it doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect. There's always something that's going to be, that's what the striving is in our Christian life.
Well, it's like, do we trust that God's way is really liberating?
Exactly.
Right? Because it's not liberating to try to take everything into your own sense. It seems like it.
I come from the generation, I am woman hearing war. I can tell you for sure, it is a trap for women. It is a trap to tear our marriages up, to tear our churches up. This is important for women to be able to take in their hearts.
Yeah, just to kind of bring all 3 points, because, when it comes to the home, the workplace, when it comes to a culture or society that really necessarily demands that we be a walking light and confront all these issues, what's interesting to me is that the gospel always gives us the way of doing things that we would not have ever thought of, right? So we are taught that the way to make a point clear or to change things is by force, whether by words, thought, or paradigm, or whatever. We have never thought that modesty can actually expose the darkness more than anything else. We never thought about that. So as forceful as we would want to be to bring a strong arm into a situation, what if we were just gospel-like, and we said with the same amount of force, we would dial in on submissive modesty, and then see what the gospel can do to expose light. So speaking the truth in love is a great thing, right? We speak the truth with unlove. That doesn't change it. But when grace appeared, the Titus said, when grace appeared, it taught us holiness and godliness.
Yeah.
Right? So show me an individual in the workplace who submits to their authority and is willing to then leave quietly at the point of contention. And I'll show you a person that has really just changed my perception of the workplace. But show me a person who's just willing to always fight for their rights. I can point to anybody else in my workplace that does the exact same thing, and they even become Christians, right? So show me somebody who's willing to come in and die for it, go to expose my darkness like that, versus just kind of playing the same game the world does. So I think there's validity to even what we're all saying coming together is that we do need to live, in a sense, radically and this hard line, but that hard line is defined and qualified by something very different than what we would say today in the workplace. Or at least what they're doing now in the world with their books and marriage counseling and stuff.
Okay. Another example is Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek." He did not say, "Blessed are the weak." Right? Meekness is not weakness. Meekness is powerful. Right? That submissiveness to God's power in your life is a powerful, powerful thing.
Is it meekness like strength under control or something?
Yeah, yeah. It's like me wrestling with Noah. I know I can crush him, but I won't.
Yeah.
Why do that?
It's kind of the overall theme, right? Like we talked about before about being vulnerability is really a strength.
Always think about Teddy Roosevelt, right? Walk softly and carry a big stick.
Well, if I'm right here, it looks like we need to get to this last verse. And let's just read it one more time. Verse 15. Yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. So we see here that it says, yet she will be saved through childbearing. We know that in Ephesians it says, Paul says that we're saved by grace. Everyone has that opportunity. So here we're jumping off the deep end of the pool again.
Yeah, but
And if
saved doesn't mean salvation there.
that's right. If they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. Who's they? Huh?
Children.
Okay, one says children. Who? Anybody else? Who's the they there? Who's he talking to? Think about it in all the different angles. Yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness and self-control.
I play devil's advocate, Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve. Okay. Now, don't you all fall behind the pastor just because he came out and said something.
I think it's
devil's advocate.
I think it's
children,
right? I think it's the children.
I think verse 15 is conciliatory comparison to this admonishment of earlier ones. It's talking about women's great gift and redemption, childbearing and motherhood in that role, and the importance of it in the relationship. I think just understand.
So you're falling on.
We're taking out children.
Well, motherhood, I mean, it's not only that, but,
Okay. John?
I just wanted to hem us in a little bit with a range of meaning. Right?
Okay.
So we know the clear teaching of Scripture in the New Testament is that we're saved by grace through faith. Paul's very adamant about that point. So he can't be saying childbearing has salvific, will be the salvific quality for women.
Is
He's not saying that.
Is everybody
So,
tuned in on that?
so there has to be something else he's intending for us to get from that. And he directly references the curses that we were just talking about. Adam and Eve and the curse. And one of the main curses in Genesis 3 is that pain in the childbirth, right? So there's stuff we're going to have to go through in this life, right? That even we will still experience it, even if we're in faith, right? The pain in the childbirth, the difficulty in the relationships.
Consequences
And
of
so-
the wrong.
Yeah, so what it is, so we go through these, we go through this life experiencing some of the things that the curse brings us. And if we embrace them in faith, and quietness and submissive, going through them, we come out the other side and we arrive with God and holiness and those kind of things. It seems to be something in that, at least when I was, something in that direction, because it can't be saying the childbearing itself is the thing saving. It'd be something else going on.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any ideas on that? What do you ladies think? The preponderance, I think, that's dangerous too. There's a lot of people who feel like they're speaking to the children. If they, the child, continues in faith and love and holiness and self-control, which refers back to the first part of the verse. I think, once again, that's where we have to land on. I don't know. I don't think we can succinctly say exactly who that is addressed to, whether it's man and woman, woman and man, woman and child, child, woman, or just children. The overarching point of that is how all of us lead our life. And do we have this fullness of our salvation? What is the fullness of our salvation? This whole thing is kind of leading us in that, and I feel in that direction, that we know that God's grace is the only thing that really saved us. But can we all admit that as we go through life, either as a man or a woman, that we grow, we call it maturity, but that we reach a fullness of our life and a fullness of our salvation? We come to a point, remember when you bowed your knee and said, God, forgive me, I have sinned, and he did. Okay, from there, we're a baby. But over time, if we learn and live our lives in that realm of godliness, we get a fullness, we have a better understanding of our salvation. Yes.
And so I want to share with you the reason why it's complex, but I share that as a way to help you build more confidence in your scripture. Because the word they is difficult because they is plural. Before that, everything is singular. And you have very few occurrences where the singular can be transitioned into a plural when it's talking about a corporate thing. Okay? So there's some complexity there. That's why you have a range of things. But the range of things, interestingly, like in other places of scripture, it doesn't take away from the scripture. It refers to they being the childbearing, means that, okay, so the woman will be delivered from this kind of like, let's say if the children continue on in faith and love and holiness and self-control, then it makes all of it worthwhile, right? That's the idea behind it, if it was the children. If the they refer to the women or the woman in plural, then that means that the woman will be delivered from any false deception of the things they thought they lost by being, submissive. They're actually gaining in their modesty. And what that can be seen in the next generation, whether their own children or the children who follow in faith, who are being faithful, love. So if you can be modest and self-controlled, you can be raising up generations who are that way. So you're not losing anything at all. But it also refers to the man and the woman. And what happens is you are delivered from what Genesis chapter 4 highlights, the Cain and Abel scenarios of the relationship between man and woman. So the man and woman were to walk in faith, love, holiness, and self-control. You'd be delivered from all the consequences of what Cain and Abel embodied from that moment on. And so if all that complexity is true, then it again goes back to Y verses 8 and 9, the idea of respectable, modesty, self-control, the idea of proper, that which is proper with the profession of godliness and good works from verse 10, right? So, all across the board, the complex three options you have still says the same thing, whether by individual, partnering, or corporate, faith, love, and holiness and self-control is the mark of what it means to profess godliness and good works. It's not by that you're getting into heaven, but it's by that heaven touches the earth. And go back to chapter 2, you do this so that everyone in this society can live a quiet life. I mean, the ripples are tremendous. It's
Part
going
of
to
it,
Genesis
if
1:5.
I understood it, is if you go back to Genesis 3, it's when God talks to this condemned serpent, it says that he will put enmity between you and the woman, it will be her offspring that shall bruise your head. Now, man's not Adam's, but her offspring.
Right.
So we can literally get away from Genesis 4, 5, and 6. 7, 8, 9. But we can be delivered from all of those things if we would focus on faith, love, respectability, holiness, self-control, fruit of the spirit in that sense, right?
Okay.
Does your text have a dash there before it says they?
Yeah, roughly if.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It could be many things. I take it in the context that he's talking about women, and it is plural, which is women, right? But it's very interesting text.
Yeah, I think what John and I looked at this week, when we were studying this, was that through, some interpretations will say it's not that they're saved through the childbearing, but it's like even though they're going through the pain of childbearing, they will, if they continue in faith and love, they're going to have the same gift that a man or anyone else would. You get the gift of salvation.
Yeah.
And I thought that might be interesting too, because it's not about the, well, you have to have a child necessarily in order to.
Yeah.
But you
It's more
can,
about that.
yeah.
It's like, well, that's short of the stick I have to go through. I mean, many women dying, like, that was it, and that was part of the curse, saying, even though this was your punishment, you're gonna receive salvation too, if you just endure.
It's not the requirement, but that is not the requirement of the board.
Yeah.
The gospel reverses all those things.
I'm glad too that John pointed out that he used a big word, salvific, right? But I'm glad that, so someone could throw you a curve, right? They say, well, what about women who don't have children? Are they not saved? We know that's absurd. So you gotta know how to stand your ground on those things too.
Okay. Brother Phil, what's your thoughts? Anything that we can just discover? He's led us now. Got some good points. So.
I don't think I have too much to add in addition, but just on, like, when you ask saved from what, right? So, like,
Can't hear you, buddy. Speak up. Sorry, I just can't hear you.
They can't.
Remember, if you can't hear.
Alan can't hear you.
I was saying when you talk about saved from, it gets kind of confusing, but if you look at the context, like, I found a couple options that I think are satisfactory.
Okay.
Deception, at least part of it.
Yes.
Transgression, or at least further transgression. And then, like we talked about, not being able to teach or exercise authority over a man.
Passion.
Sorry, this is not like, relation to this verse, but when I think about people like Hannah, right, obviously praying for a child, you don't really hear that much about Hannah, like she really prays, God praises her. And I do think that there's so many indications in scripture where God does look at the people who are praising and Timothy's grandmother and those who raised up in the faith. There's no loss as far as God's his praise of women, even though they might be in a different role than a man. And I think that helps us just to appreciate, like, it's not that the woman's less capable of doing things or anything, it's just that there's a certain design that God has in place. There's like many things in this world, a certain design He's put together. It's just trusting that that design is the best, that He knows best. But yeah, there's so much to be gained from And he praises women for their holiness.
My takeaway, and we're gonna finish this by reading through this, and I want you to think about it, but my takeaway is, I see nothing here that diminishes my thought for my life, or my thought for women in the role that they play. I see nothing here. I see, moreover, the ability for them to be a role model. This is tough, what you guys do, what ladies do. So, and we'll see what the men have to do too, but.
Well, that's the dirty word, right? Roles.
Yeah.
Roles, that's the,
Not the easy.
dirty word, roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my encouragement is that, if you want to look at the scriptures, and I hate to talk about this way, if you want to look at the scriptures culturally, you would have to agree that God is one of the greatest feminists that we know, right? It's just that we have bought into a fallen definition of what feminism is supposed to be, and therefore we kick against God's. But if you just trace through, like Sister Ashley was bringing up, is that you just trace through how he glorifies, magnifies, and even speaks first to. There's no biblical ground for us to diminish the value of women.
Absolutely.
But rather to encourage them to say that there's more in what God has ordained for us as our roles and responsibilities. If we were just to do what we ought to do, they lose to the fullness of the kingdom here. So I mean, we talked about this when we did like cultural reform, is that, we're not saying that God's anti-feminine. He's one of the greatest feminists we know, but he's brought into all the lives of all the other movements of our times. And our children are too.
That's why I'm meaning to say.
Well, I'd like to close out today.
And I'll
I'll
leave you Phil's text you later.
It's a short chapter. I'd like to close out today after we went through this in, I think, very amendable ways. We had some very good discussion on this today, and as we looked at God and His Word, and what His intent was here. But let me read this to you. You all follow along and just think about your role and where you are. What Paul's asking us to do through God. First of all, then, I urge that supplications, prayers, and intercessions and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. This is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God, our Savior, who desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. For there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and men, the man, Christ Jesus, who gave himself as a ransom for all, which is the testimony given at the proper time. For this I was appointed a preacher and apostle, and I'm telling the truth. I am not lying, a teacher of the Gentiles in faith and truth. I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands, without anger or quarreling. Likewise, also the women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. Let a woman learn quietly, with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, if they continue in faith and love, and holiness, and self-control. We all have our roles to play in that. But just remember the essence of godliness is what we're striving for here. I don't know who's going to have the first part of chapter 3 next week. Well, somebody will be up here. And we just ask that you use your guide here. It looks like we're going to be looking at 3, 1 through 7. 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7. Phil, would you close us in a word of prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together to gather and to learn from your word, learn from you. Thank you for these men and women, and for the sisters relative to coming together, for learning together, staying here. It's great to do this for us this morning. It's a lot of some when people worship and they honor you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all. Church service is